The day my granddaughter looked me in my eyes and lied to my face, that's when I knew something had gone off somewhere. Not just with her, with all of us. Her name is Camille. She's 24 now, but that day she was 23, sitting right there at my kitchen table like she'd done her whole life, eating my food, sipping my coffee like everything was normal. And she told me she hadn't spoken to her mother in weeks, said things weren't good between them, said she didn't even know where Renee was staying. Now, Renee, that's my daughter, my only child, and I had just gotten off the phone with her maybe 40 minutes before Camille knocked on my door. I didn't call her out, didn't even let it show on my face. I just poured myself some coffee, sat down across from her, and let her talk. And she did, kept right on going, like she needed to fill up the space. Told me about her job, about some man she'd been seeing, about how stressed she'd been lately. Just talking and talking. And all I could think was, why lie about something like that? It wasn't even a big lie. That's what stuck with me. It wasn't about money or trouble or anything you'd expect. It was small, quick, like she didn't even pause before saying it. That's what bothered me, because when you get to be my age, you learn something. Small lies don't travel alone. They usually walking ahead of something bigger, clearing the path. Now, before I go any further, you need to understand Renee a little bit. My daughter has never been an easy woman to love. I say that with honesty, not judgment. She came into this world strong-willed, sharp with her words, and she's carried that same energy her whole life. Loving her, it takes patience. Her and Camille, they've always had a complicated kind of bond. The kind where they need each other more than they'll admit, but still manage to hurt each other over and over again. I've watched it play out for years. Arguing, then not speaking, then finding their way back, only to start all over again. After a while, I stopped trying to step in. Some things you just can't fix for people. But this time felt different. About 3 weeks before Camille came by, Renee had called me, and she was crying. Not loud, not dramatic. That wasn't her way. It was quiet, tight, like she was holding herself together by force. That's when I knew it was serious. She told me Camille had borrowed money from her, a good amount, too, and when Renee asked for it back, Camille said she didn't have it. Then after that, she just stopped answering her calls. I told Renee I'd talk to her. I meant it, too. I just hadn't figured out how yet. I'm always trying to find the right way to say things, trying not to make a bad situation worse. So when Camille showed up that afternoon, I decided I'd wait, let her speak, see what she brought up on her own. She didn't mention that money, not once. She stayed with me almost 2 hours, helped me around the house, straightened up a few things without me asking. We sat and watched television like we used to, laughed at something silly, shared a pot of soup I had on the stove. It all felt so normal. When she got ready to leave, she hugged me the same way she always does. Tight, like she means it. And I held her just as close, because no matter what, that's still my granddaughter. But after she pulled out of the driveway, I went back and sat down at that kitchen table. And I kept thinking about that lie. Not even the money, the lie. Because if she could sit there, look me straight in my face, and tell me she hadn't spoken to her mother in weeks, knowing full well I talked to Renee all the time, then either she forgot, or she didn't care. And I didn't like either one of those answers. I picked up my phone to call Renee back. That's when I noticed a message I hadn't seen earlier. Came in while I was out at the grocery store. Number I didn't recognize. It said, "Miss Patricia, I think you should know what's really going on. It involves your daughter and your granddaughter both. I'm sorry to reach out like this, but I didn't know who else to tell." I just sat there for a second, staring at that screen. Something about it didn't feel right, but it didn't feel like something I could ignore either. I set the phone down, then picked it back up and typed, "Who is this?" I watched those little dots come up, then disappear, then come back again. And right then, I had a feeling whatever they were about to say, it wasn't going to be simple. The name that came back was Marcus. I didn't recognize it. I told him that. He said he figured as much and apologized for reaching out the way he did. Said he'd been holding on to something for a while now, and it didn't sit right with him anymore. He said he was Renee's neighbor, the apartment she moved into after her divorce, about 8 months ago. He explained they weren't close, just neighborly, a quick check-in here and there, maybe a conversation in the hallway. The kind of connection you don't think much about. I asked him what it was he needed to tell me. He paused, then said he'd rather do it in person. Now, I'll tell you the truth. My first instinct was to shut that down right there. At my age, when somebody you don't know asks to meet face-to-face about your family, it usually means trouble, the kind that doesn't come with easy answers. But that line he wrote earlier stayed with me. I didn't know who else to tell. That didn't sound like gossip. That sounded like somebody carrying something heavier than they wanted to. So I agreed. We picked a coffee shop not too far from my house. Saturday morning. In the meantime, I called Renee. She answered on the second ring. That alone told me she'd been expecting to hear from me. I kept things simple. Told her Camille had come by, that she seemed all right. Renee went quiet for a moment, then asked, "Did she say anything?" I told her no. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, "Mama, I don't want to get you involved in this." That right there, that's when I knew we were past borrowed money. I told her she'd already brought me into it the moment she called me crying 3 weeks ago. She didn't argue with me, but she didn't open up either. Just said she was handling it, that she'd explain when things made more sense. I've heard Renee say that all her life, and more often than not, handling it means she's about to go down a road I wouldn't have chosen. I let it rest for the night. Saturday morning came, and I went to meet Marcus. He was already there when I walked in. Looked to be around 40. Quiet, but not nervous. More like he was measuring his words before he said them. He thanked me for coming. I told him to go ahead. He took his time getting into it. Said about 2 months back, he started noticing Camille coming around more often. At first, nothing strange about that. A daughter visiting her mother. But then one evening, he came home and heard them arguing out in the hallway, loud enough that he stopped before turning the corner. He told me he hadn't meant to listen, but he couldn't help but hear what was being said. He said Camille told Renee that if she told anyone what she knew, Camille would make sure people found out things about Renee too. I asked him to say that again. He did. I remember setting my coffee down, real careful, like I didn't trust my hands all of a sudden. Then I asked him, what things? What could Camille possibly have on her mother? He shook his head, said he didn't know everything. But a few weeks after that, Renee had knocked on his door late one night. He said she looked shaken, not crying, not loud, just unsettled in a way you don't fake. She didn't give him the full story, just pieces, enough for him to understand that Camille hadn't been borrowing money. She'd been taking it, small amounts at first, spread out, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. Then it got bigger. Renee only caught it because she switched banks and went back through her old statements. I didn't say much while he was talking, just sat there and listened. He told me Renee hadn't gone to the police, said there was something Camille was holding over her. He didn't know what. Renee hadn't told him, but whatever it was enough to keep her quiet. We sat there for a moment after he finished. I thanked him. That's all I could do. Then I drove home. I stayed in my car in the driveway for a long time before I went inside, just sitting there, hands on the wheel, trying to line everything up in my mind. Camille at my kitchen table, talking like nothing was wrong, laughing at the television, helping me move that box in the hallway without me asking, just like she always has. Then Renee, carrying all of this by herself, not telling me, and I couldn't decide if that came from shame or fear. I finally went inside and pulled out my box of important papers, bank records, insurance, old documents. I don't even know what I thought I might find. I just needed something to do with my hands while my thoughts caught up. Then my phone rang. It was Renee, and the moment she started talking, I could hear it. Something had changed. Her voice was flat, not angry, not upset, just emptied out. She said, "Mama, Camille knows I talked to someone. I don't know who told her, but she knows." I asked her how she knew. She said, "She just called me. Said if I don't drop it, all of it, she's going to the rest of the family with what she has on me." I didn't dance around it this time. I asked her straight out, "What does Camille have on you?" And Renee, she didn't answer. That silence stretched so long, I started to wonder if the call had dropped. But I could still hear her breathing. Renee didn't answer my question that night. She told me she needed a few days, said she'd come see me in person, that it wasn't something she could explain over the phone. I didn't push her. I've known my daughter long enough to understand. If you press her before she's ready, you don't get honesty. You get distance. So I told her I'd be here, and I let it go. Those next few days were quiet, not the peaceful kind, either. The kind where the house feels a little too still, and your mind won't give you a break. I found myself thinking about Camille as a child. Back when Renee was going through her first hard stretch, Camille stayed with me for a while. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. I walked her to school most mornings, sat at the table with her while she worked through her homework, stayed up with her on nights when she couldn't sleep. I knew that little girl, or at least I thought I did, and that's what weighed on me the most. Not just what I was hearing now, but how far it felt from the child I remembered. But I've lived long enough to know people aren't just one version of themselves. The person you love and the person who makes bad choices can live in the same body. That doesn't excuse anything. It just makes it harder to sort through. Renee came over that Thursday evening. The moment I opened the door, I could see it on her. She looked worn down in a way that sleep wouldn't fix, like something had been sitting on her for too long. She sat at the same kitchen table Camille had been sitting at days before. I brought her a glass of water, gave her a minute, didn't rush her. Then she started talking. She told me that about 4 years ago, she'd gotten into a financial situation worse than she'd ever let on. Between jobs, behind on bills, trying to keep things from falling apart. Someone she knew offered her a way to make quick money. It wasn't violent. She made sure to say that. But it wasn't legal either. She did it a few times. 2, maybe 3. Then she stopped. Said it scared her enough that she walked away before things could get worse. She was never caught, never questioned, and as far as she knew, nobody in the family ever found out. But Camille had. Renee wouldn't tell me how. Said it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that Camille had known for over a year, just holding on to it, waiting. And when Renee confronted her about the missing money, that's when Camille brought it out. I sat there for a minute, letting that settle. Then I asked how much money we were talking about. Renee told me it was more than I expected, not something you could brush off. Enough that she'd been quietly pulling from a credit line just to cover her rent the past couple months, not telling anybody why. I asked her what she planned to do. She said she didn't know. I can't remember the last time I heard Renee say those words. That's what shook me the most. She's always been sure of herself. Even when she's wrong, she's sure. Hearing uncertainty in her voice, that was something else. I told her plain, whatever she did 4 years ago, she didn't deserve to be held over a barrel by her own child. Now, I didn't excuse what she'd done. She knew better than to expect that from me. But there's a difference between facing your mistakes and being controlled by them. What Camille was doing, that was control. Renee wiped her eyes quick, like she didn't want me to notice. I told her I needed some time to think. After she left, I thought about calling Camille. Picked up the phone once, then set it back down. Did that twice. Not because I was afraid of the conversation. I've had my share of hard talks in this life, but I wanted to be clear in my own mind first. Words don't disappear once you say them, especially not in a family. I also found myself thinking about Marcus. I couldn't shake that part. A neighbor stepping in like that, reaching out to me, that takes more than casual concern. I couldn't tell if Renee knew he'd contacted me or not. I made a note to come back to that later. 2 days passed. Saturday afternoon, my doorbell rang. It was Camille. She looked put together, like she always does when she wants things to go smoothly. Had a small bag in her hand, smiling like nothing in the world had shifted. Said she'd been thinking about me. Brought something from that bakery I like. She walked in like it was any other visit. Sat down, started talking, opened that bag, and slid it across the table like everything between us was easy. And I let her get comfortable, let her pour herself some water, settle into her chair, let the conversation stay light for a few minutes. I wanted her to think this was just another afternoon. Then I placed both my hands flat on the table and looked at her. Camille, I said, I know what you've been doing to your mother. Her smile didn't drop right away. That's the part that stayed with me. There was a moment, just a couple seconds, where she held on to it, like she was deciding whether she could keep the act going. Then it started to fade. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand just enough to stop her. I'm not asking, I told her. I'm telling you I know, and I need you to understand that before we go any further. I expected denial, maybe anger, something defensive, but that's not what I got. She looked at me for a long moment, and then her eyes filled up, and in a voice so quiet I almost missed it, she said, Grandma, there's something about Mama you don't know, something she never told you. She paused, watching my face, and you need to hear it before you decide whose side you're on. I told her I wasn't on anybody's side. And I meant that. I needed her to hear it before she said another word. I'm the mother and the grandmother in this family. That means I don't get to pick and choose who I understand. I have to see the whole thing, even when it hurts to look at. Camille took a breath and set her glass down real careful, like she needed a second to steady herself. Then she started talking. She said what Renee told me about 4 years ago, that it wasn't just a couple of desperate choices. Said it had gone on longer, months, not just a handful of times. And somewhere in the middle of all that, some of the money had passed through an account with Camille's name on it. She said she was 19 at the time, told me her mother had her sign some paperwork, said it was routine, nothing to worry about. But it wasn't routine. And by the time Camille understood what she'd been tied to, it was already done. She said she confronted Renee about it, asked her straight out, and Renee told her to leave it alone, said everything was handled, said nobody would ever find out. I listened without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her just one thing. So, you decided stealing from her was the answer? She flinched at that word. I could see it land. She said it wasn't like that. Said she felt like Renee owed her, that she'd been carrying this for years, feeling exposed, lied to, and Renee never once acknowledged it. Never sat down and owned what she'd done. She said taking the money, it was the only way she knew how to make her mother feel it. Now I understood what she was saying. I did, if what she told me was true, and I didn't have enough yet to fully confirm it or deny it. Then Renee had pulled her into something she didn't fully understand, and then tried to bury it. That leaves a mark on a person. That kind of thing doesn't just disappear, because time passes. But I told Camille plain, pain doesn't give you permission to pass it on. Being wronged doesn't make you right. And using what you know about somebody to keep them quiet, that's not justice. That's just another kind of harm. She didn't argue with me. She just sat there. And I let the silence sit with us. Sometimes that's where the truth settles not in the words. After a while, she said, I didn't know how else to make her feel it. That was the most honest thing she'd said since she walked through my door. Not an excuse, just the truth. And the truth is, sometimes people do the wrong thing because they don't have another way to express what's been building up inside them. That doesn't make it okay, but it does tell you where it's coming from. I told her she needed to talk to somebody about what she described. A professional, someone who could explain exactly what her situation was legally and otherwise, sitting on it, using it like leverage that wasn't going to protect her. It was only going to make things worse over time. She nodded. Then I told her she needed to return what she'd taken. Not because I was demanding it in that moment, but because there's no way forward for any of us if that part stays the way it is. You can't build anything steady on top of something like that. She nodded again, didn't argue, didn't push back. When she got up to leave, I walked her to the door and held her for a moment. She felt different, smaller somehow, like something heavy had finally been spoken out loud. And now she had to carry it in a new way. After she left, I went back to the table and sat down for a minute. Then I called Renee. I told her Camille had come by, that we talked. And then I told her something I'd been holding back, that I knew the situation was deeper than what she'd shared with me. And if we were going to get through this as a family, she was going to have to be fully honest, not pieces of it, all of it. She went quiet. Then she asked, how much did she tell you? I told her enough. That conversation we had after that, it was one of the longest we've ever had. Renee confirmed most of what Camille said. Not all of it. She insisted Camille understood more at the time than she's admitting now. I don't know where the full truth sits. It's probably somewhere in the middle, like it usually is. But one thing became clear to me. This didn't start with stolen money, and it didn't start with threats. It started a long time ago, in smaller moments, in things that weren't said, in choices that felt easier at the time, in a mother who didn't protect her daughter the way she should have, and a daughter who chose punishment instead of speaking her hurt out loud. By the time it all showed up in my kitchen, it had been growing for years. Things aren't fixed. Not even close. Renee and Camille, they're still not in a good place. Some of the money has been returned. Not all of it, but enough that it means something. There are still conversations waiting for them that I can't have on their behalf. I still talk to both of them, and I haven't chosen a side. What I have done is tell them the same thing I'm holding on to myself. Accountability doesn't work one way. You don't get to demand it from somebody else and excuse yourself from it at the same time. That's not accountability. That's just trying to win. And I'm too old to be chasing that. I just want my family whole again. Some days, I can still see a path to that. And then there are other days when I'm not so sure anymore.